Now that we have set up our paid time off and sick leave information, let's process an accrual entry. All of the items that we need to create an accrual entry in PROCAS can be found under the Accounting menu and Labor submenu. These three items are listed in the order of which they are performed, starting with Process PTO Hours Accrual, then the PTO Hours Accrual Journal, followed by the PTO Accrual Report, which supports the Adjusting General Journal entry. Let's navigate to the first step of the process. Step 1. Process PTO Hours Accrual. Process PTO Hours Accrual starts things off with the selection of which employees we want to accrue hours for. You'll notice this form uses information that we have already set up in the system, which was covered in the previous video. My employees have autofilled with their default hours set up on the PTO Accrual by Person list. However, if we need to change any of these hours for this specific timesheet period, we can simply type over their default amounts. We have the ability to filter this information using the parameters at the top and the column headers below. Some common options include separating entries for hourly and salaried employees, full-time and part-time employees, and vacation, sick, and other PTO types. You can mix and match whichever fields you'd like to get to your preferred list. In this example, let's filter for both full-time and part-time employees and vacation type of PTO and select Search. This updated our selection screen for all employees that meet our criteria. From here, we can select which employees we want to accrue hours for by individually checking the boxes on the left or by using the Select All checkbox at the top. Let's select all employees and hit the Next button at the bottom of the screen to get to our preview. On this preview screen, let's look through to make sure our selection was correct. Again, if a modification needs to be made, we can adjust the accrual hours on the right. Once everything is accurate, we can enter a transaction date at the top to recognize when the new accrual hours are available for employees to use. Let's create our entry. Step 2. PTO Hours Accrual Journal. The PTO Hours Accrual Journal is the main hub to control employee balances in PROCAS. If you are familiar with our legacy product, this replaces both the PTO Authorization accounting menu and the Triggers Journal for accrual tracking. This new journal, starting with a V for vacation, stores accrued hours for each employee on the date of which it was calculated. You have the ability to scroll back to prior entries to see what employees' balances were at specific points in time. In addition, you can copy repeating entries moving forward, which will be covered in a few minutes. Let's add a description for PTO/vacation accrual to accurately label this entry. The detail of this journal is broken down as follows. Everything in the first 2/3 of each row is what you would expect to find in the Legacy Triggers Journal. This information is mostly read-only, pulling employee names, seniority dates, charge codes, leave types, and accrual accounts from previously established parts of the system. However, both employee codes and hours are editable, meaning you can make adjustments to this journal. If you need to insert or delete an employee, or adjust an existing employee's hours for the period, you can make those changes here. Everything in the last third of each row is what you would expect to find in the Retired PTO Authorization menu. These columns attribute to the balances that employees will see on timesheets and are broken down as followed. Total hours accrued. This total is the sum of all prior accrual entries in the system for each employee on this PTO charge code. Hours used. This total is the sum of all used hours for each employee recorded in labor journals against this PTO charge code. Balance. This number is the subtraction of the total hours used from total hours accrued to give you an accurate balance for each employee. To update balances, select the Calculate button at the top of the screen. This calculation will take into consideration the most recent adjustments you've made to this entry, as well as any adjustments made to prior entries. Let's calculate balances for our employees. At this point, we can review if the numbers look accurate for how much PTO we expect our employees to have. If things aren't correct, go ahead and make adjustments as needed. Once they are accurate, select the Update button at the top of the screen to push the new balances to employees. One thing to note, these balances will have to be imported into timekeeping via the Time and Expense Administration menu. To finish up, let's lock the entry from future edits. At this point, we are ready to calculate the adjusting amounts for accrued leave on our financial statements. However, there are two additional points I'd like to cover before moving forward. The first point is an alternate method for creating this journal. As mentioned earlier, you have the ability to copy prior accrual entries. It can be faster to create your entry by copying prior information if there aren't too many changes to be made. For example, to accrue our sick leave information, let's copy a prior entry. According to our policies, all employees accrued 2 sick leave hours for each timesheet period. Let's copy this forward using our period ending date. From here, we can add or remove employees or adjust hours as needed, as mentioned previously. This copy function can be useful for situations like tracking state-regulated part-time sick, blanket PTO accrual policies, and other policies. The second point is the changes made to employee work authorizations caused by selecting the Update button at the top. Let's navigate to Work Authorization by task to see these changes. In the prior video, I mentioned there were 3 columns that we would come back to on this screen: budgeted hours, accrual date, and used hours adjustment. You will notice that 2 of these columns updated automatically after processing our accrual entry. Budgeted hours updated with the total hours accrued for each employee. This number will always represent the total hours accrued for this PTO task, which will be seen as budgeted hours on employee timesheets. As mentioned previously, you can put a hard cap on these hours if you choose to enforce work authorization parameters company-wide in your company settings. Accrual date updated with the date of our most recent accrual entry. This will be seen as the earned through date by employees as they request PTO and complete their timesheets. Used hours adjustment has not updated, but is used when there is a discrepancy between the balances employees see on timesheets compared to what you see in the accounting system. To check if there are any discrepancies, view the PTO Authorization and Balances report under the Time and Expense Administrator menu. If there are any, you have 2 ways to go about correcting them. If the discrepancy is caused by accrual hours not matching, make an adjustment in the PTO hours accrual journal. However, if the discrepancy is caused by used hours not matching, make an adjustment in this column. Let's navigate back to the PTO Hours Accrual Journal to complete our financial statement adjustments. Step 3. PTO Accrual Report. Now that our employees' balances have been adjusted, it's time to update our financial statements. There is only one step involved in completing this process. The Accrue Expense button in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen will automatically create these entries in the General Journal. However, if you are interested, you have the ability to see the details of what the system will use. To see this detail, navigate to the PTO Accrual Report. On the PTO Accrual Report screen, you have multiple parameters to determine how much information you would like to pull into your report. If you want to see everything, all you have to do is make sure you select your report type and hit Print to see all the PTO information through the specified transaction date. You have two report options. PTO Accrual Report will give you all the details related to your transactions for each employee in multiple rows. PTO Accrual Report Summary will consolidate all journal transactions into one row for each employee. Let's run the detail report to see our most recent transactions in full detail. On this report, you will see that our employees populated with their hours earned, hours used, and hours balance, which should match the calculation on our most recent journal entry. Some new columns include the rate column and the hours valuation column. The rate column displays the effective rate for each salaried employee and the hourly rate for each hourly employee, which will be applied to the employee's balances for a proper valuation. The effective rate is calculated using the pay rate frequency listed on the personnel record for each employee and the associated base hours under pay frequency setup. The hours valuation column is the rate applied to the hours balance for each employee. This information is summarized using three key totals. Total valuation is the sum of the hours valuation for all employees. Accrual balance is the total accrued amount currently listed on the trial balance. This includes all prior accrued leave entries up to this point. Total expense amount is the difference of the above two fields, which is the adjusting amount the system will use when creating the general journal entry. This report shows both our PTO information and sick leave information, with both adjusting entry amounts to be made. Now that we have seen the detail that goes into the automatic calculation, let's navigate back to the Hours Accrual Journal and create our adjusting entries. Step 4. Accrual entry in the General Journal. Selecting the Accrue Expense button has taken us to the General Journal, where our adjustments have been recorded. In the detail of this entry, we can see that our fringe expenses for sick leave and paid time off have been adjusted for the amount specified on the accrual report. These adjustments are balanced using the accrued sick leave and accrued vacation liabilities. Now that we have created this entry, if we were to run the accrual report again, the total valuation and accrual balance will match. At this point, we are finished with the PTO accrual process. Thank you for taking the time to learn how to track accrued leave in PROCAS.